The galaxy had grown quiet in ways that made fear linger. A distress signal had gone out from the edge of a war-torn star system, a cry for help that no one wanted to answer. The fleet that had sent it was already broken, their ships drifting through space like scattered debris, and their worlds had fallen under a force so ruthless that it erased entire planets from the charts. The call had been simple: help us. Yet in a universe crowded with civilizations, none replied. Pride, fear, and calculation left the message unanswered. The weak were left to die, and the strong turned away. On one of the Coalition's command stations, Commander Rhinath stared at the blinking screen, the signal repeating in an endless loop. His eyes were tired, but they remained fixed on the words. The message itself was almost meaningless, a standard distress transmission, but the tone carried desperation, a raw human-like plea that gnawed at something he could not name. It was weak, vulnerable, and hopeless, but it was persistent. "No one else is answering," he muttered, almost to himself. "Sir, I've sent the coordinates to every nearby fleet," his aide said, her voice calm, almost rehearsed. "All have declined. They cite operational risks. Some say the enemy is too strong. Others argue it's a political matter." "And they expect us to sit here?" he asked. "That seems to be the consensus, sir," she replied. "They have every right to decline. This is the cost of war. We cannot force them." In that silence, he could feel the weight of the decision he had not yet made pressing against his chest. The fleet at the edge of known space was burning, their lives ending slowly, and not one civilization cared enough to step in. Weeks passed, and still the distress signal continued. No replies came. The galaxy had a memory, and sometimes it was cruel. The Coalition considered the system a lost cause, marked only by coordinates and a fading signal that would soon die. But even in the despair of the command station, an anomaly appeared. The communications officer froze, a small hand hovering over the console. "Commander, I'm receiving a response," she said. Her voice was quiet, almost disbelieving. Rhinath walked over, his gaze sharp. "From where?" Saul was not considered important. Its technology was primitive, its fleets laughable. Any response from there was statistically impossible. "Show me," Rhinath said, trying to keep his voice steady. The officer hesitated, then activated the feed. On the display appeared a rough, grainy transmission. A figure stood in the shadow of a barren landscape, the sky behind them hazy with dust storms. Their uniform was utilitarian, battered, and patched. They did not speak with the precision or polish expected of a galactic diplomat. Instead, the figure's voice was steady, almost defiant. "Where is the enemy?" it said simply. The room fell silent again. Rhinath felt a shiver run down his spine. This was not a plea for help. This was not a surrender or a negotiation. This was a demand. The officer looked at him nervously. "Sir, I don't understand. They just want to know where the enemy is. No demands, no conditions, no requests for technology or resources. They only came because someone asked for help. They came because someone called." There was a rawness to them, a strength not born from fleets or weapons, but from the harshness of the world they called home. The term Deathworlder suddenly felt small and meaningless. Within days, a small fleet of human ships appeared at the edge of the Coalition's station. They were unlike anything Rhinath had ever seen. Sleek ships of alien design were meant to glide and shine, but these were practical, scarred, and functional. Hulls bore marks of repeated repairs. Engines were loud, shaking the air of space with unrefined power. The humans were not impressive in the conventional sense. They were terrifying in a way the Coalition had never encountered. As the human fleet moved closer, Rhinath convened the command council. "What do we do?" one counselor asked. "These are Deathworlders. They cannot match us in technology, and yet they arrive unbidden. We have no idea what they are capable of. If they are as dangerous as they appear, we will see it soon." They organized survivors without waiting for leadership. Their ships maneuvered into combat formations that no one had taught them, their tactics strange but devastatingly effective. The Coalition watched, amazed and unsettled. They were witnessing a species that operated by rules no one else followed. Humans adapted to danger instinctively, using what they had, making do with what others would consider insufficient. They did not fear death. They accepted it as part of life, and they used that acceptance as strength. Even more shocking, the humans communicated simply and directly. There was no convoluted command structure, no endless debate. Decisions were made quickly, and every member of the fleet acted as if they were part of a single organism. They responded to threats with efficiency, improvisation, and creativity, turning desperation into power. Within the first few days, the coalition saw the first results. Ships that had been written off as lost were now functional. Systems that had been compromised were repaired with speed that defied expectation. Small enemy skirmishes were repelled, not with overwhelming firepower, but with cunning maneuvers, traps, and daring attacks. Rhineth could not believe what he saw. "They are thriving where we expected failure," he muttered. "They are rewriting the rules of engagement simply by existing." As the sun rose over the surface of Sol, one of the human commanders addressed their crew in a simple voice. "We go because they called. We go because someone needed us. Nothing else matters." Their words were not meant to inspire. They were a statement of fact. The crew nodded, eyes hard, faces etched with the scars of life on a planet that demanded everything. Back on the Coalition station, Rhineth realized that the galaxy had underestimated something fundamental. Humans did not seek power or recognition. They did not calculate risk in the way other species did. They acted because it was necessary, because it was right, because to ignore a call for help was unimaginable. And now, the galaxy would witness the cost of ignoring them. The enemy was still out there, vast, relentless, and merciless. They had destroyed everything in their path, yet the humans faced them without hesitation. They used tactics that others would consider suicidal, strategies that relied on sheer audacity, and a willingness to endure pain that other species could not fathom. The Coalition fleets, once paralyzed by fear and indecision, began to watch in awe. What they had dismissed as a primitive, chaotic species was now something else entirely. They were Deathworlders, yes, but they were also a force shaped by struggle, honed by survival, and capable of confronting the impossible. Rhineth could feel it in his bones. This was not just a fight for one system. This was a lesson for the galaxy. Humans had arrived, and they would not leave until the enemy was stopped. For the first time in weeks, the Coalition felt hope, and with hope came fear, not of loss, but of revelation. Humanity had arrived, answering a call that no one else dared to respond to. The galaxy was about to discover that the deadliest, most resilient warriors were not the most advanced, the most elegant, or the most intelligent. They were human, and they were coming for the enemy. The human fleet moved through the void like a storm no one had expected. The Coalition ships, polished and efficient, tracked them warily, ready to intervene if necessary. They had been trained to respond to hostile forces, to anticipate deceit, to measure danger and act accordingly. But these humans did not follow the expected patterns. Their movements were unpredictable, almost reckless, yet effective in ways that confounded every algorithm and tactic the Coalition had ever known. As the humans approached the edge of the combat zone, their ships jutted and rattled, hulls patched and worn, engines glowing with uneven energy. On board, humans moved quickly, calmly, and without ceremony. Their uniforms were simple, worn from years of survival, and their faces bore the marks of life on a world that demanded toughness. No one had ever seen beings like them. They looked ordinary, yet the air around them carried a sense of purpose and quiet menace. Commander Rhineth watched from the Coalition station, leaning forward in his chair. "They are approaching without permission," he said, a mixture of disbelief and curiosity in his voice. "What do they intend?" "They do not appear to be seeking orders or approval. Their fleet is moving independently." They boarded crippled ships abandoned by the enemy, repairing critical systems with speed and skill that surprised the Coalition engineers. They patched engines with crude but effective materials, rerouted damaged power conduits, and restored weapons systems that were considered inoperable. One Coalition officer whispered to another, "How are they doing that? These ships are centuries ahead of anything on Earth." They moved directly into danger, using daring maneuvers that seemed suicidal but always worked. They trapped enemy ships in impossible situations, forcing them into mistakes that more sophisticated fleets could not anticipate. On board one human ship, Commander Harris watched the tactical display with quiet intensity. Her crew moved with precision, following orders that were brief, clear, and to the point. "Flank the smaller vessels from the starboard side," she said, voice calm. "Do not stop for repairs mid-combat. We fix them after we neutralize the threat." They had learned to trust instinct as much as orders, and that trust created a synergy that seemed almost unnatural to the Coalition observers. Every ship was an extension of the commander's mind, every crew member an extension of the ship itself. The Coalition could not help but notice that humans did not fear death. They accepted it as inevitable and unremarkable, a tool in their arsenal rather than a burden. Human pilots flew into enemy fire with a confidence that terrified alien observers. They boarded enemy vessels while under attack, improvising strategies that relied on risk and daring. The aliens, who valued control and predictability, were beginning to understand that humans operated under rules no one else could comprehend. In one engagement, a human ship, badly damaged and outnumbered, broke through an enemy blockade by diving directly into a dense asteroid field. Coalition advisors gasped. The enemy had assumed the humans would surrender, but instead they adapted to the chaotic environment, using asteroids as cover and turning the battlefield to their advantage. Within hours, the ship had emerged unscathed, the enemy forced to retreat. Back on the Coalition station, Rhinath could hardly contain his astonishment. They are thriving where we expected disaster," he muttered. "Every action they take is calculated, yet unpredictable. They turn disadvantage into power." It was a principle that none of the Coalition had truly understood until now. As days passed, the humans began coordinating with Coalition survivors in subtle, understated ways. They did not issue commands but suggested solutions, showing through action rather than words how to achieve them. Coalition captains, initially resistant, began to follow their lead. The humans' presence was not a threat, it was a revelation. In one critical moment, a Coalition ship trapped in an energy field was about to be destroyed. A small team of human engineers boarded the vessel under fire. With no concern for personal safety, they rerouted power, stabilized the ship, and guided it out of danger. The Coalition crew stared in disbelief. Why did they risk themselves like that?" one officer asked. "Because it was necessary," the other said simply. "Humans, they are not afraid of loss, they are afraid of failing to help." Each maneuver seemed improvised, yet each succeeded beyond expectation. Coalition analysts scrambled to adapt their strategies, but every prediction they made failed. The humans were rewriting the rules in real time, shaping the battle with creativity born from survival, not technology. Commander Harris communicated with her crew calmly, issuing orders that were direct and concise. "Focus on what is in front of you. Adapt, use what you have, protect your allies, do not hesitate." Coordination like this without complex systems, without centralized control, was impossible. Yet the humans achieved it effortlessly. Even the enemy began to notice. Ships that once attacked without fear now hesitated, forced into defensive maneuvers they had never anticipated. The humans did not strike randomly, they struck strategically, exploiting weaknesses that others would have missed. Every move was unexpected, yet devastatingly effective. In the Coalition command room, Rhinath finally leaned back in his chair, eyes wide. "They are unstoppable in ways I cannot define, not because they are stronger, but because they refuse to follow our rules. They make the impossible routine." As the sun rose over the distant battlefields, the human ships cast long shadows across the stars. Survivors looked upon them with awe. The aliens who had mocked and feared these Deathworlders were now beginning to understand that the term primitive was meaningless. Humans were not defined by technology or appearances. They were defined by resilience, ingenuity, and unshakable determination. Rhinath watched them move and realized that the galaxy would never forget this moment. Humans had arrived not because they were the strongest or the most advanced, but because they were willing to endure, to adapt, and to act when no one else would. Their methods were strange, even reckless, yet effective. Their courage was unyielding, and their focus was absolute. For the first time, the Coalition dared to hope. The humans were not just participants in this battle, they were a force capable of changing the outcome entirely. And as they moved forward, a new understanding began to take root. The universe had underestimated humanity. The humans would not be content with small victories. Every move they made, every risk they took, was aimed at ensuring that the helpless would be saved, the enemy would be confronted, and failure would not be accepted. The Coalition had seen countless species across the galaxy, but none had ever approached danger with the same calm, focused resolve. Commander Harris looked at the distant enemy ships through her viewport. She did not flinch, did not hesitate. She did not calculate survival probability or debate the cost. She acted. And with every act, the humans proved themselves not just capable of surviving a death world, but capable of surviving the entire galaxy. The battle was far from over. The enemy remained vast, merciless, and unknown. Yet the humans advanced without pause, showing a combination of cunning, courage, and adaptability that no one had anticipated. Where others might have feared failure, they found opportunity. Where others might have retreated, they pressed forward. Where others might have surrendered, they fought. The coalition observed, inspired, and terrified in equal measure. The humans were not like any species they had known. They did not fight for power, prestige, or reward. They fought because it was necessary, because someone had asked for help, and because they could. And that was enough. The humans had arrived, and now the enemy faced something it had never encountered before. The fleets that had once moved with precision and confidence now hesitated, confused by the unconventional tactics of the Deathworlders. The humans did not follow the patterns the enemy expected. They did not retreat when overwhelmed. They did not fight predictably. Every attack was daring, risky, and unorthodox, but somehow it worked. Commander Harris stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching multiple screens at once. Each one displayed a part of the battle, and yet she saw more than just ships and weapons. She saw opportunities, weaknesses, and possibilities. "Focus on the gaps," she said quietly. "Use their confidence against them. Make them fight our way." Humans did not rely on advanced algorithms or complex calculations. They relied on intuition, experience, and the ability to adapt to chaos. Where other species would see danger, humans saw options. Where others froze, humans acted. One squadron of human fighters engaged a cluster of enemy ships near a dense asteroid field. The enemy expected the humans to scatter, to avoid risk, to flee. But the humans dived into the asteroids, weaving between rocks and debris, using the chaos as cover. Their movements were erratic and unpredictable, yet perfectly coordinated. Enemy missiles struck the asteroids instead of the ships, and the humans emerged on the other side to strike from unexpected angles. On the Coalition command station, analysts stared in disbelief. "They are using the environment," one said. "Every action they take exploits the battlefield itself. No other species would attempt this." Enemy ships that had been considered lost were reclaimed in hours. Teams of humans entered hostile vessels under fire, repaired systems, and neutralized threats with a combination of speed, ingenuity, and sheer audacity. Coalition observers had never seen anything like it. The humans treated danger as a tool rather than a barrier. In one intense encounter, a human boarding party infiltrated a heavily armed enemy cruiser. The crew had been trained for extreme conditions, and their leader, Lieutenant Kara, moved with calm precision. Explosions rocked the ship, fires spread along corridors, and alarms blared constantly. Yet Kara and her team advanced, cutting through obstacles, improvising with whatever they had at hand. Enemy forces panicked at the unexpected assault, surrendering or fleeing in confusion. Within hours, the cruiser was under human control. "What drives them?" whispered a coalition officer observing the operation. "Why risk everything for a single ship?" "That is all they need to act." Each engagement forced the enemy to rethink tactics that had once guaranteed victory. Commander Harris issued new orders to her fleet. "We cannot fight like they expect. Use their assumptions against them. Take risks they cannot imagine. Protect your allies, but do not fear danger. We adapt, we endure, we win." Ships moved in perfect coordination without complex commands. Humans anticipated each other's actions, and in doing so, they became more than individuals. They became a single, unstoppable force. In the midst of the chaos, another human captain, Lieutenant Merrick, noticed a weakness in the enemy formation. "Their flank is exposed," he said. "It's a trap, but we can use it. Follow my lead." No fear, no hesitation, no limits. The enemy, which had seemed unstoppable, now faltered under relentless pressure. The humans were relentless because they saw the value of every life. Whenever coalition ships or civilian transports were threatened, humans intervened, even at great personal risk. They treated allies' lives with the same urgency they treated their own. Where other species would calculate acceptable losses, humans accepted nothing less than saving all they could. During one encounter, a human squadron diverted from their attack to protect a convoy of refugee ships. The enemy had assumed the humans would prioritize offensive action, but the Deathworlders chose to shield the vulnerable instead. They positioned themselves between the convoy and the attackers, drawing enemy fire while the convoy escaped. Casualties were taken, but the mission succeeded. The humans mourned, repaired, and returned to the fight without hesitation. Coalition leaders, once skeptical of the humans' presence, now began to see them as essential. They were not the most technologically advanced, but they were adaptable, fearless, and indefatigable. Every human action carried lessons in strategy, courage, and leadership. Fleet captains began asking for advice, for guidance, and the humans shared it not for status or power but because it was needed. Even the enemy noticed the change. Their attacks became cautious, hesitant, and desperate. They could not predict how humans would respond. Every engagement became a trial in improvisation and endurance, and slowly the humans' influence reshaped the battlefield. Commander Harris watched as another human squadron executed a daring maneuver. A heavily damaged fleet was surrounded, seemingly trapped. But the humans used the environment, enemy assumptions, and their own audacity to break the blockade. Ships that had been doomed moments earlier were now escaping, and the humans emerged unscathed. Back on the coalition station, Rhineth finally understood the truth. "They are not strong in the way we define strength," he said aloud. "They are strong because they refuse to accept impossibility. They survive, adapt, and act. They fight not for glory or power, but because it is right." The humans had not only changed the battlefield, they had changed the hearts and minds of those around them. As the battle reached a critical point, a massive enemy assault threatened to overwhelm the coalition forces. Hundreds of ships, coordinated with precision, advanced with overwhelming firepower. Humans did not panic. They did not flee. Instead, they organized a counteroffensive. Smaller human teams moved to key positions, exploiting weak points in the enemy formation. They set traps, redirected enemy fire, and drew opponents into vulnerable positions. The coalition watched in awe as the humans turned what seemed like certain defeat into a stunning victory. Enemy ships were destroyed or captured, and survivors fled in disarray. Human losses were notable but acceptable to them because they had achieved the goal. They had saved the coalition forces, secured strategic positions, and forced the enemy to retreat. Lieutenant Kara, reporting from one of the reclaimed enemy ships, said simply, "We did what had to be done. We saved those we could. The rest will follow." Her calm tone, even after hours of intense battle, was a hallmark of the human spirit. They acted without self-doubt, without hesitation, and without fear. As the battle ended, the coalition began to recognize a simple truth. Humans were extraordinary, not because of technology or numbers, but because of character. They adapted where others could not, endured what others would not, and fought for what others considered impossible. They were unpredictable, relentless, and courageous in ways that reshaped the war itself. Rhineth stared at the screens, finally understanding the fear and respect that the galaxy would come to hold for humanity. "They are not just survivors," he said softly. "They are a force. A lesson, and no one will ever underestimate them again." Across the galaxy, the enemy would soon learn the same lesson. Humans did not fight like any other species. They did not retreat, they did not surrender, and they did not compromise. They acted because it was right, because someone needed help, and because they could. And in the end, that was enough to change the course of the war. The Deathworlders had arrived. And now the enemy would understand why humanity was feared and respected across the stars. The humans did not wait for orders. Where the coalition hesitated, debating strategy, calculating risks, and weighing losses, the Deathworlders acted. Commander Harris gathered her captains in the briefing room of her flagship, the hum of engines and distant battle vibrations filling the space. "We do not wait," she said simply. "We go to them, we strike where they believe they are safe. We use what they have taught us, their arrogance, their mistakes are ours to exploit." They moved quickly, decisively, and with a unity that left others in awe. Each ship and crew knew their role, not because it was dictated in endless protocols, but because survival, strategy, and instinct were all part of the same rhythm. As the fleet jumped into the enemy system, coalition leaders watched nervously. The humans were advancing directly into the heart of enemy territory, a place no one else dared to enter. Their ships were battered, their numbers limited, yet they carried an air of inevitability, as if victory were not optional but certain. The enemy, confident in their strength and arrogance, had expected hesitation. They had assumed humans would wait, hide, or retreat when faced with overwhelming odds. But the Deathworlders ignored these assumptions entirely. Their ships moved swiftly, unpredictably, and with deadly purpose. The first engagement began near an abandoned orbital station. The humans did not attack in formation, as conventional fleets would. Instead, they split into small teams, each using different approaches simultaneously. Some drew enemy fire deliberately, while others struck from angles that were thought impossible. Explosions rocked the station and debris filled the void, yet the humans navigated the chaos with uncanny skill. Lieutenant Kara directed one team, her voice calm over the comms. "Use the structures for cover. Do not stop, adapt. Every obstacle is a tool. Her crew responded without hesitation. Every maneuver was calculated yet improvisational, a balance of courage and ingenuity. The enemy was forced into defensive actions they had never trained for. The coalition observers could not believe what they saw. Ships previously thought lost were being reclaimed, systems repaired mid-battle, and enemy formations disrupted with a combination of strategy and raw audacity. "They are changing the rules," one officer whispered. "They are forcing the enemy to react, not act." The humans did not destroy it immediately. Instead, they captured key ships, used them to replenish their fleet, and redirected supplies to coalition forces. Where others would have ignored logistics in favor of direct combat, humans exploited every resource to maximum effect. Commander Harris observed the results through her tactical display. "Every move matters," she said quietly. "Every life, every ship, every opportunity. Nothing is wasted, nothing is ignored. That is why we win." Each successful maneuver, each daring strike, undermined enemy morale. Ships that had been disciplined and coordinated were now chaotic, struggling to respond to threats that appeared from nowhere. In one daring operation, a small human team infiltrated the central command ship of an enemy squadron. The vessel was heavily guarded, with defenses no other species could have breached without extreme losses. But humans did not hesitate. Using precision, timing, and improvisation, the team disabled critical systems, sowed confusion, and withdrew before the enemy could mount an effective counterattack. When the command ship faltered, the surrounding enemy ships were thrown into disarray. Coalition leaders began to understand something fundamental. Humans were not relying on conventional strengths. They did not need superior numbers, advanced technology, or overwhelming firepower. Their advantage lay in adaptability, decisiveness, and the willingness to act when others would freeze. Every ship, every crew, every action reinforced the humans' reputation. Across the battlefield, coalition forces began to mirror human strategies. They moved boldly, followed unconventional tactics, and reclaimed territory thought lost. Where hesitation had once dominated, confidence now surged. The humans were not merely fighting. They were teaching, inspiring, and transforming the coalition fleet from passive observers to active participants. In the midst of the counteroffensive, Lieutenant Merrick spotted an opportunity. A cluster of enemy ships was isolated near a gravity anomaly. He directed his squadron to engage. "They cannot expect us to fight like this," he said calmly. "We move where they believe they are safe. Every assumption they make is a weakness we exploit." The anomaly could have crushed ships, disrupted engines, or caused catastrophic collisions. Yet the humans treated it as an asset, not a threat. They maneuvered with precision, forcing the enemy into the anomaly while using it to shield their own fleet. Ships that had been considered doomed moments earlier now emerged victorious. Back at the coalition station, Commander Reineth could hardly believe what he was witnessing. "They do not just survive, they dominate," he murmured. "Every risk they take, every move they make turns disaster into advantage. They fight like the galaxy itself is their ally." They drew forces into traps using nothing but ingenuity and daring. Where others would have feared loss, humans accepted it as part of the cost, using it to drive forward rather than retreat. The Deathworlders' courage was not reckless. It was purposeful, calculated in ways invisible to anyone who had never faced true survival. As the battle reached its peak, the humans' audacity forced the enemy into retreat. Fleets that had once struck terror into entire civilizations now fled before the Deathworlders' relentless advance. Coalition forces, emboldened by human leadership, pressed the advantage, reclaiming systems and planets previously lost. Commander Harris addressed her fleet over the comms. "We go because it is necessary. We fight because it is right. Every risk is calculated, every action matters, and every life is valued. Continue forward. We adapt. We endure. We win." They fought because someone needed help, because survival demanded action, and because retreat was never an option. The coalition began to see the difference between strength and effectiveness. Humans were effective in ways that transcended technology, numbers, or reputation. They were effective because they refused to accept failure. In the aftermath of the counteroffensive, the battlefield was littered with wreckage, both enemy and human. Yet the humans' losses were not wasted. Every sacrifice had contributed to the greater success. Every ship saved, every life protected, and every strategic advantage gained reflected the Deathworlders' philosophy. Act decisively, adapt constantly, and never abandon those who rely on you. Coalition fleets began to recognize a truth they had never fully understood. Humans were not merely participants in the war, they were catalysts. They transformed fear into hope, hesitation into action, and chaos into opportunity. Where other species would falter, humans thrived. Where others hesitated, humans acted. Commander Rhinath stood before the Command Council, finally articulating what had become obvious. These humans, they are not defined by technology, numbers, or training, he said. They are defined by courage, ingenuity, and the refusal to leave anyone behind. They are teaching us how to fight, how to survive, and how to win when the odds are impossible. Their work was not complete. They repaired their ships, tended to the wounded, and prepared for the next challenge. They did not wait for praise or recognition. Their focus remained absolute. The enemy must be defeated, and those who relied on them must be saved. As night fell over the war-torn systems, the humans gathered briefly on their ships. They did not speak of heroism or victory. They spoke of the next move, the next risk, the next challenge. For humans, the battle was never about glory. It was about responsibility, courage, and action. Across the galaxy, the legend of the humans grew. Other species began to whisper about the Deathworlders who fought without fear, who adapted to chaos, and who transformed hopeless situations into victories. The enemy would learn soon enough that humans were unlike any other species, and the Coalition had learned firsthand that they were the most powerful allies anyone could have. And yet, the humans did not change. They remained the same determined, adaptable, fearless fighters who had arrived weeks earlier, answering a call for help that no one else had heeded. Their presence was a statement. Someone called and they had come. Someone needed help and they had answered. The galaxy would remember that moment forever. For the humans, the war was far from over. But for now, they had turned the tide. The enemy had been forced to retreat, the Coalition had been inspired, and a new hope had been born. And as the stars gleamed over the battlefield, it was clear that the humans were no longer just survivors. They were a force that could change the course of history. The humans moved with a sense of inevitability, as if the universe itself had conspired to place them at the heart of the final battle. Every ship, every crew, every action was purposeful. Commander Harris stood on the bridge of her flagship, her eyes scanning the battle coordinates. The enemy's forces were still vast, their fleets formidable, but they were no longer confident. The Deathworlders had shattered their assumptions, destroyed their pride, and turned fear into strategy. "Form the advance squads," Harris said. "We go in where they think we cannot. We hit where they are weakest. Every move counts." The enemy fleet, spread across multiple sectors, scrambled to coordinate. Commanders shouted into comms, trying to anticipate the humans' next move. They expected hesitation, fear, and miscalculations. But the humans showed none. They acted with confidence, decisiveness, and an adaptability that no simulation could predict. On the battlefield, Lieutenant Kara directed her squadron through a heavily defended region near the enemy's capital station. Enemy fire rained down in relentless waves, yet the humans maneuvered with precision, using obstacles to their advantage. They repaired minor damages mid-flight, improvised solutions, and struck with deadly efficiency. The enemy had never faced a species that thrived under such pressure. "This is insane," one alien officer muttered as he watched the destruction unfold. "They are fearless. They are unstoppable." The vessel was heavily armed and trapped by defensive fields that would have destroyed conventional boarding parties. The humans, however, did not hesitate. They disabled the shields using improvised techniques, neutralized the crew, and redirected vital supplies to Coalition forces. The enemy had not anticipated such a combination of ingenuity and audacity. The humans' actions inspired the Coalition fleets. Ships that had been paralyzed by fear now moved boldly, following the Deathworlders' example. The humans taught through action, demonstrating that courage, adaptability, and quick thinking could overcome even overwhelming odds. Coalition captains who had doubted humanity's abilities now trusted their instincts and followed the lead of the Deathworlders. Commander Harris observed the battlefield and identified a critical vulnerability, the enemy's central command hub. It was heavily guarded, surrounded by layers of defensive fleets and protected by advanced technology. No conventional assault could succeed without massive losses, but humans did not rely on convention. "We go to the core," Harris said simply. "We strike where it hurts most. The enemy expects chaos. We give them precision." Enemy fire tore through the rocks, but the humans adapted. adjusting their course, timing, and tactics in real time. They moved with a combination of daring and calculation that made them nearly impossible to target effectively. Inside the hub, a human boarding party infiltrated the command center. The enemy had set traps, automated defenses, and highly trained guards, but humans anticipated unpredictability. They disarmed systems with improvised tools, redirected security protocols, and disabled critical communications. Within hours, the heart of the enemy fleet was in human control. As the enemy's central command faltered, their fleets became disorganized. Ships collided, retreated, or surrendered. The Deathworlders did not pause to celebrate. They pressed the advantage, coordinating strikes across multiple sectors, reclaiming lost territory and rescuing survivors wherever possible. Every action was purposeful, every risk calculated, and every life valued. Commander Harris addressed the fleet calmly. "We do this because it is necessary. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We fight because retreat is not an option. We act because someone needs us." The enemy realized too late that they had underestimated humanity. They had assumed fear, hesitation, and predictability would guide human actions. Instead, they encountered strategy born of chaos, courage born of hardship, and adaptability forged through survival. Every failed attack, every loss reinforced humanity's strength. Coalition leaders watched as humans advanced steadily, reclaiming systems and neutralizing threats with minimal losses. The Deathworlders' efficiency, ingenuity, and fearlessness were reshaping the battlefield in ways no one had imagined. Ships thought lost were recovered. Supply lines were secured. Strategic positions previously abandoned were reclaimed. Humanity's presence alone inspired allies to fight harder and more creatively. In one final operation, humans coordinated a multi-pronged attack on the enemy's remaining strongholds. Teams moved in simultaneously, exploiting weaknesses, drawing attention, and striking decisively. Every maneuver was synchronized without formal orders, every action anticipating the enemy's reaction. The enemy, once confident, now scrambled desperately to survive. Lieutenant Kara led a strike team directly into the heart of the enemy's central station. Alarms blared, automated defenses fired relentlessly, yet the humans moved with calm precision. They disabled weapons, neutralized crew, and secured critical infrastructure. Within hours, the station was in human hands, signaling the enemy's collapse across the galaxy. The coalition fleet, emboldened by human leadership, pressed forward. Systems previously lost were liberated. Civilian transports were protected. Strategic resources were reclaimed. Humanity had turned what seemed like certain defeat into total victory, not through overwhelming power, but through determination, ingenuity, and courage. On the flagship's bridge, Commander Harris looked over the fleet. Every human ship bore scars from the battle, yet every crew remained focused, ready for the next challenge. She knew the enemy was finished, yet she did not celebrate. Victory to humans was never a prize, it was responsibility fulfilled. Back at the Coalition command station, Commander Rhinath spoke to his council. They did what no one else could. They acted where others would hesitate. They adapted when others would fail. They fought because it was right, and they have changed the course of this war forever. Humanity is no longer just a species. They are a force the galaxy cannot ignore. For the humans, however, the battle was not about fame or recognition. They repaired their ships, tended to the wounded, and ensured the coalition forces were secure. They acted because it was necessary. They acted because someone had called. They acted because survival and justice demanded action. The enemy, scattered and broken, fled into the far reaches of space. They would remember humanity's arrival, but more importantly, they would never again underestimate what it meant to face the Deathworlders. The galaxy had learned a lesson it could not forget. Humans did not fight like anyone else. They were fearless, adaptable, relentless, and unyielding. Commander Harris addressed her fleet one final time over comms. The enemy has been forced to retreat. Systems are liberated, lives are saved. We do not stop because the battle is over. We remain vigilant. We act because it is necessary, not because it is expected. That is what makes us human. They had fought when no one else would, survived when no one expected them to, and achieved victory when all seemed lost. Across the galaxy, coalition leaders and observers could only watch in awe. Humanity had arrived, answered a call that no one else dared to respond to, and in doing so had rewritten the rules of warfare, strategy, and courage. They had shown that true strength was not in technology, numbers, or rank. It was in determination, adaptability, and the refusal to abandon those in need. And as the stars shone over the reclaimed systems, it was clear to all who witnessed it that the humans of Earth were no longer just survivors of a harsh planet. They were a force capable of shaping the galaxy itself. Their courage, ingenuity, and unwavering determination would be remembered forever. The galaxy had learned an undeniable truth. When no one else answers, call the Deathworlders. Humanity would come. They always did. And with that, the humans prepared for whatever the universe would throw at them next, knowing that their strength, resolve, and courage would always carry them forward.